Jesus sits on the Mount of Olives with 4 of his disciples and answers their direct question about when the temple would be destroyed and what signs would point to the end. He begins his answer by warning them about deception. He then describes wars, uprisings, earthquakes, famines, and pestilences as the beginning of birth pains. These events are not the end itself, but the increasing pressure that comes before it. Today we look at how Mark and Luke record this warning and why Jesus addresses deception before he describes the disasters. Good day, Grace Keepers. My name is Joe, and this is Daily Dose of God. Welcome. Before we jump in, grab the workbook linked down in the pinned comment and in the description so you can follow along with these notes. Stay with me to the end. This week we are laying Mark 13 and Luke 21 side by side so you can see the full picture of what Jesus taught about the future. All right, pull up a chair. It's time to get to work. We're going to read Mark 13, 3 through 8, and Luke 21, 7 through 11. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will these things happen? And what will be the sign that they are all about to be fulfilled?" Jesus said to them, "Watch out that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name, claiming, 'I am he,' and will deceive many. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places, and famines. These are the beginning of birth pains." "Teacher," they asked, "when will these things happen? And what will be the sign that they are about to take place?" He replied, "Watch out that you are not deceived, for many will come in my name, claiming, 'I am he,' and 'the time is near.' Do not follow them. When you hear of wars and uprisings, do not be frightened. These things must happen first, but the end will not come right away." Then he said to them, "Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, famines, and pestilences in various places, and fearful events, and great signs from heaven." Mark and Luke record the same moment on the Mount of Olives, but each gospel brings slightly different details that help us see the full picture of what Jesus was saying. Both passages begin with the disciple asking Jesus for a clear sign. They want to know when the temple would be destroyed and what would indicate that the end was approaching. Jesus answers them with the same first command in both accounts: "Watch out that no one deceives you." He tells them that many will come, claiming to be him, and will deceive many. This warning about false leaders comes at the very beginning of his answer. Mark and Luke both describe wars and international conflict. Mark uses the phrase wars and rumors of wars, while Luke adds wars and uprisings. The word uprisings points to internal civil unrest. Riots and rebellions and the breakdown of order inside cities and nations. This means the trouble Jesus describes is not only coming from outside armies, but also from within societies themselves. Both Gospels list natural and economic disasters. I feel like I'm reading a news column, not prophecy. It's that crazy anymore. Luke adds pestilences and fearful events and great signs from heaven. These are presented as events that will happen, but Jesus is careful to tell his followers not to be alarmed by them. Jesus uses the image of birth pains to explain these events. A woman in labor experiences contractions that grow stronger and closer together. The pain is real and difficult, but it serves a purpose and leads to something new. Jesus uses this picture so his followers would not interpret every disaster that comes along as the final one. These events are difficult, but they are also a sign that something greater is approaching. The key difference between the two accounts is this. Mark focuses more on the command not to be alarmed when things happen, while Luke adds the stronger warning not to follow those who say the time is near. Both are preparing believers to stay steady when the world around them grows chaotic, and especially when deceptive voices increase. This section of the Olivet Discourse is a direct continuation of what we began yesterday. Jesus has already told his disciples that the temple would be completely destroyed. Now, they're asking him when that would happen and what signs they could look for that point to the end of the age. We're building this study on the foundation we established earlier in our Road Back to Revelation series. We have already studied the entire book of Daniel, which gave us the long view of world empires rising and falling. We've also gone through Matthew 24 and 25, which laid out the overall sequence of end times events. Now here, Mark and Luke are filling in the specific details of how these events will feel and what believers should do when they see them. Having multiple accounts of the same conversation is helpful because each writer brings a different emphasis. Mark writes with urgency for believers who were already facing persecution. Luke writes with careful historical detail for a wider audience. Together, they give us a clearer picture than either one would by itself. The birth pains language is pretty important because it sets the tone for everything that follows in this discourse. Jesus is telling his followers that the troubles they will see are not random or meaningless. They are part of a larger process that leads somewhere. This connects directly to what we'll see later in Revelation. Many people today are watching the news from the Middle East and asking themselves whether the increasing conflicts we see are part of what Jesus was describing. That's a natural and honest question. Jesus gives us a kind of framework to help us understand what we're seeing and how we should respond. He tells us that wars, uprisings, earthquakes, famines, pestilences, they're going to happen. And he also tells us not to be alarmed when we see them happen, and not to follow those who claim to have all the answers in the middle of it all. This is very practical guidance. When nations are in conflict and societies feel unstable, fear spreads like wildfire. People look for strong leaders who promise safety and order. Jesus warns us ahead of time that some of those voices will, in fact, be deceptive. This does not mean that we ignore what's happening in the world or hide under a rock and pretend current events have no meaning. It does mean that we hold them with a different perspective. We can watch the increasing tension in the Middle East and recognize that these kinds of conflicts have happened all throughout history, and they're going to continue to happen. At the same time, we don't have to live in a constant anxiety or rush to follow every voice that claims to have the solution. Jesus' command to watch out that no one deceives you is very relevant. In times of crisis, people are more willing to give up their freedom in exchange for security. Don't do that. They are more likely to believe strong claims from leaders who appear confident. Donald Trump. Jesus tells his followers to stay grounded in what he has already said rather than being swept away by fear or false hope. This is why he uses the birth pains image. A woman in labor does not panic with every contraction. She knows the pain has a purpose and an end. Jesus wants his people to have that same kind of steady awareness. We don't ignore the difficulty of what we see. We don't ignore the pain. But we also don't lose our footing in it. Jesus begins his answer to the disciples' question by first warning them about deception, then describes wars, uprisings, and natural disasters. He calls these events the beginning of birth pains, so his followers can understand that these troubles, while very difficult, are not the end itself. They are part of a process that leads somewhere. This warning is meant to prepare us, not frighten us. When we see conflict increasing and societies under pressure, we have a choice. We can react with fear and look for human saviors. Don't do that. Or we can remember what Jesus told us and stand straight up and steady. The same Jesus who predicted these events also promised to be with us as we're going through them. When you hear Jesus say these events are the beginning of birth pains, how does that change the way you look at current events? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tomorrow we move forward to the next section where Jesus gives more specific warnings about persecution and betrayal. Please hit that like button, share it with someone, and make sure you're subscribed. Stay in the Word, folks. Thank you all so much for being here. God bless you and yours, and I can't wait to see you here tomorrow for another dose. Have a great day, folks.